of the African internalizing of that superiority that says, yes, we're all equal, you know, as such, right, as human beings, but there's something more progressive about that European culture, so we need to take it on, right? It's the ideology of modernizing, right? To modernize is to become more Western. To become more Western is to modernize. So Negritude, without apology, rejects these notions. Political, social, and assumed moral hegemony of Europe and its white settler populations. And the movement includes writers from the African continent, the Caribbean, the Indian Ocean islands, and if one, and a place like Kanak, the Kanak Republic, New Caledonia in the South Pacific. It asserts a total consciousness of belonging to the black race. Now that's one of the things that's problematic for the critics of negritude, right? That it accepts the notion of race. Most folks are today in agreement that there is no biological basis for this idea of race, but there's definitely a social basis for it, right? And social societies have structured themselves around the idea. So whatever myth there may be to the biological idea, the social idea is real. Affirms cultural worldviews, values, and practices of the black world, sometimes uncritically, but again, the idea is we do not need to look outside of ourselves for explanations of, you know, what it means to be human in the world, to walk through the world, that no cultures need to look outside themselves. They need to, in fact, need to look within, including with a critical view. As Fanon says in The Wretched of the Earth, right, that chapter on national culture. And he mentions, just because the Mexican peasant knows that once upon a time as people built pyramids, or the peasant in Mali knows that once upon a time there was a Songhai Empire, just knowing that is not going to free you, right? I mean, there's more work that has to be done, more analysis, etc. But you still need to know it, though, right? You still need to know that. That's where your models come from. Also asserts the value of local cultures, indigenism, also creolite. So, as it is a form of a kind of black universalism, and Pan-Africanist in its approach and its vision. There was a lifelong correspondence between Nicholas Guillen and Langston Hughes. They translated each other's work for the local populations. There's a poet, Jean Monique, I can't remember his first name. Monique, though. M-A-U-N-I-K, from Mauritius, who writes about visiting the Ifa shrines in Yoruba land with Wole Soyinka, and knowing that this is his home, right? He may come from Mauritius, but he knows he's at home in Nigeria. So despite, or I shouldn't say despite, along with this Pan-African vision is the valuing of the local. Right, that there is a local version of these. So the indigenous movement as such emerges in Haiti, and partly as a response to the American occupation in Haiti. Suzanne Césaire, born Suzanne Roussy, meets Aimé Césaire in Paris. Eventually they get married. She was a great proponent of not only the assertion of this more universal idea of an African, a global African culture, but also the local, right? That she was from Martinique, that the local Martinican culture deserved to be studied, celebrated, etc. The forms of the local peoples need to be used as or for our new art. The exact thing that Langston Hughes attempts to do in using using blues rhythms and blues patterns in his poetry. That James Baldwin says he was attempting to do in his prose, and even Toni Morrison has said the same thing. Their attempt to write in a jazz rhythm. Whether they achieve it or not is up to you, right? It's up to any of us as the readers, but they're starting from within, right, for their aesthetic, rather than from without. And this is one of the things that distinguishes, I think, Langston Hughes and Zora Neale Hurston from their contemporaries, their attempt to use the folk culture. Oh, okay, Suzanne Césaire, Negritude and Surrealism. Many scholars will want to take the attitude of that surrealism had a profound effect upon the Negritude movement. And there was certainly interaction, co-inspiration, but they've got it wrong, right? It really goes the other way. That it was the Negritude writers who had the profound effect on the surrealist theorists and painters, etc. Because part of surrealism, along with other modernisms, was a rejection of the West, right? Them rejecting their own culture, seeing it as ultimately failed. Ultimately failed because of the mass slaughter of World War I, the excesses of colonialism, the alienation of industrial capitalism, right? So, you know, these are the iconoclast and those who reject their society. And so one of the things they do is to look outside of Europe for inspiration. So they look to see what the colonial subjects are doing, and are inspired by the works of the Negritude artists who are reaching into the African culture and the mystical traditions, right, for their imagery, for their explanations of what it means to be human. So in an essay titled Surrealism and Us, 1943, Suzanne writes, thus far from contradicting, diluting, and diverting our revolutionary attitude toward life, and revolution is the key, surrealism strengthens it. And I'm also thinking of tomorrow. Remember what Langston says, right? We build our temples for tomorrow. Millions of black hands will fling terror across the furious skies of world war. The most disinherited peoples will rise up from the plains of ashes. So, this is not just intellectual masturbation, right? There's something is to grow from these seeds. A new world, a more just world, and even a world where the idea of race can be squashed. I feel like I'm forgetting something. Let me check my notes. Oh yeah, that's what I was forgetting. Frida Kahlo, the Mexican painter, often called a surrealist painter. Just as, and Suzanne Césaire, in a commentary, another commentary on surrealism, again, she was open to it. There was a lot of co-inspiration, but she was committed to indigenous forms and not assimilating to European forms, but again, creating our own forms from within our own cultures. Frida Kahlo, when the preeminent French surrealist theorist, André Breton, was praising her work, and Frida Kahlo is often thought of, right, as surrealist in her painting, and one of the definitions of surrealism is that it's an attempt to represent the reality beyond reality, the sort of dreamlike quality and absurdity of life. Frida Kahlo's response was, I don't paint my dreams, I paint my reality. But it's a different sense of the world than the European worldview. Okay, so some of the criticisms of negritude, it's been called a kind of black racism. And again, partly because it plays on this idea of race. It's been called an inferiority complex, and interestingly to me, many of the African writers writing in the English language were some of the biggest critics of negritude. Wole Soyinka, for example, is a great critic of negritude. I've gone blank on the brother's name from South Africa. Ezekiel. Yes, thank you. Yes, another big critic of negritude. And this idea that it's an inferiority complex. I find their arguments unconvincing. And then when I see it in their work, and I'm thinking particularly of Wole Soyinka, a practice of negritude, right? A practice of taking African cultural forms to explain African aesthetics. So, for example, in an essay on tragedy, the Yoruba idea of tragedy, rather than using Apollo and Dionysus the way Nietzsche does, he says no, right? We have to look at Obatala and Ogun as the opposition, and then not as an opposition, right? But as this sort of complementary duality. And what is tragic is our separation from the divine, right? That's what is tragedy in the Yoruba tradition, not the sort of two kind of moral, ethically sound positions colliding, but the experience of and the recognition of our separation from the divine, which is then our purpose, right? To realize that. Now, to me, that's a practice of negritude, of taking our own internal ideas as an aesthetic guide, right, for the artist. Did I go too fast? Yeah, okay. African literature and European languages, right? How do you develop African culture using European languages? And certainly enough, these writers are taught in English classes and French classes and are praised for their development of these languages. So you have a move against that, writers like Ngugi wa Thiong'o, who insist on writing in Kikuyu and let them translate, right? And I'm fully in support of that. However, I am an English-speaking person, an Ebonics-speaking person, and a smattering of a couple of Romance languages. And it's on me to pick up some African languages. Brother over in Little Ethiopia said, come on by. I'll teach you Amharic. So it's on me to get over there. This idea of essentialism, right? The idea that there is some sort of black essence or female essence, and that these are not ideas that are produced by history. This is one of the major criticisms of negritude, of some aspects of the New Negro movement, but I'm going to agree with Bell Hooks, black cultural theorist, and Gayatri Spivak, an Indian cultural theorist, that that accusation of essentialism misunderstands the problem. Right, that we are engaged in a struggle to define ourselves, and so we have to resist. We have to resist accusations of essentialism from any sort, from a Eurocentric point of view. That in fact we require a strategic kind of essentialism because we need to revalue ourselves. We need to learn that we are worthwhile, that we are, that our human walk is a worthwhile walk and does not require a move toward Europe in any sort of way. And so if that requires the promotion of some sort of black essence, then so be it. Again, without apology, right? Because of the context of colonialism and white supremacy. Just as Fanon says about Marxism, You know, when you're talking about colonized countries in the South, you gotta switch it a little, right? Because it does not directly apply to this experience, right? You have to be able to adjust that theory. Leopold Sédar Senghor, right? One of the originators of the movement. He, Aimé Césaire, Léon Dumas, who was from French Guiana in South America. They meet as students in Paris, I think in the 1930s. They found a magazine, The Black Student, eventually become, well, they are the founding fathers along with Suzanne Césaire, founding mother of the Negritude movement. In the 1950s, I believe it is, he writes this essay, Negritude, A Humanism for the 20th Century, and it's a response to some of this criticism, because one of the criticisms is that it's particularist, right? How can someone who isn't black have access to it? So he breaks it down in terms of an African worldview, that in fact, in all particularisms is the universal, because there is no such thing as one universal human truth. So in each human truth, we find the universal. And what is universal about it? It's humanity that we can recognize. So he actually describes gives a version of the African worldview using the spider web, you know, as a kind of model. All things being connected to all others. In this cycle of energies, right, that we manipulate, manage, etc. Relates the ideas to, at the time, new contemporary ideas in physics, in quantum physics, about the relationships between time and space, collapsing those differences, etc. Right? So it is an essay on how, in fact, the philosophy of negritude is open to any who can take it up, right? If they, because it is actually beyond a racialism. Okay, now the people who fall under this rubric, the New Negro movement, negritude. They run a range of political tendencies. Now, a good number of them are self-identified Marxists and socialists, like the Césaires, Langston Jacques Roumain, a member of the Haitian Communist Party, Nicolas Guillen, member of the Cuban Communist Party, René Depestre had to get out of Haiti, and he still lives an unrepentant revolutionary in Cuba today. Others supported bourgeois liberalism, Zora Neale Hurston, member, well, you know, an anti-racist member of the Republican Party, but of course she was a member of the Republican Party when most of us were members of the Republican Party, because that was the party of anti-racism at the time. But, you know, was very politically conservative. And then Senghor, a self-identified socialist, but...
Contradiction.
Yes, exactly. You know, facilitates French neocolonialism. And then, you know, the Papa Doc Duvalier, who promotes the idea of noirism in Haiti. You know, promoting the black suffering classes, but that didn't keep him, right, from collaborating with the United States, from murdering his own people, imprisoning his own people. So negritude by itself, right, does not a revolutionary make, right? And there is a range among you know, the various proponents and practitioners of the work. A Rainbow for the Christian West. That's some of the poem. It's the subtitle of the poem. René Depestre, I think one of the finest examples of negritude, of a negritude piece. The subtitle of the poem is a voodoo mystery poem. And I'm going to read the prelude. That's the beginning and end of the prelude, but I'm going to read the whole thing to you. Wait a minute, I looked at that page, so I'm going to have to do this, and I did it anyway. There we go. Okay. Now this is a book-length poem, and within the poem, right, it focuses on a senator's family in Alabama. And the speaker in the poem is exacting vengeance for the black world on this Alabama family. The rainbow, right? The rainbow is significant in the Vodun cosmology of Haiti as this bridge between heaven and earth, among other things. Let me read. All right, this is the prelude. Yes, I am a tempest nigger, a nigger rooted in the rainbow. My heart grows tight as a fist to strike at the false god's face. At the end of my sadness, there are claws shooting forth. I blow up my shadows into 1,000 lion mornings. I am the thunder on your roofs. I am the wind shattering all. I am the virus that does not spare. I am the disasters at the stock exchange. Gladly my son signs all your plagues. I am a little girl crossing a torrent of gall every morning to go to school. And the black pastor who stirs up the still living ashes of his church. I stir up the legends of my life. I will not build any new temples. I blow up my fear. I explode my biology. In a rain of stars upon your heads, I have come to stuff your dogs with straw. I have come to stuff your ferocious laws. I preserve your prayers in alcohol. Your tricks, your taboos, your white man's lies, and the crown of thorns of which you are so proud, I put it on the head of my trained bear. Both of us will climb on the next plane for London, Paris, Rome, Madrid, Lisbon, Brussels, Toronto, Los Angeles, Miami, Cape Town, Sydney. The world will see what you have done with the man who was crying under the olive trees. That's how he starts it, as he lays out to the criminal his crime and why justice is necessary. Then he takes on the role of the various loa of the Vodun, who are the ones who actually exact the revenge, right? As they possess him and he exacts revenge. He's Ogu Farel, Ogu of Iron, Ogun. I am Ogu Farel, or General Beit Ogu. Fire is my right arm. The tower where my sword keeps watch, I know his secrets, his thirst and his torments. I know his hates. I know all his disgust. He does not like to be given the flesh of a man to eat. He does not like to be thrown solitude like a bone. And the despair of the human heart, fire does not draw his coal from the anguish of the black man. Fire likes to sing, to laugh, to drink, to make love with the air, to work to expand the frontiers of man. The human race is his origin, his joy and his heaven, his faith and his hope. Some green leaves die in him every time a white hand throws a black body in his abysses. He burns him, he devours him, he absorbs him and digests him. But in his soul of fire, silent tears strangle the green leaves. But in his soul of fire, he laments the child of fire he was. I am Ogu Farel. I come to say that the fire no longer has a ray of patience in the root of his fire soul. The fire child is tired of crying. The fire child is tired of playing with dead leaves. Right? The time for explosion is near. Let's see if I can find, I think I lost my place. I wanted to find the one, oh, there it is. Yeah, there it is. Let's see. I am Baron Lacroix, Baron the Cross. The dog baying at death in your garden, it's me. I am the black butterfly flying around the table. One more word and I change your little southern lives into so many little crosses forged in the iron of my soul. Right, so his purposes are bloody on those who have made the Africans suffer. Legacies of the New Negro movement, Poesia Negra, the Negritude movement. There are still people, right, who think of themselves as Negritude writers, as purveyors of a black aesthetic. I mean, there was the musical group. When did they emerge in the 90s? The Sounds of Blackness. I mean, that's the idea. That's the idea of negritude, right? The sounds of blackness. So the Black Arts movement, emerging in the 1960s, is an expression of the same idea. The Black Consciousness movement in Azania, the Rastafari movement, insofar as it is change your consciousness, right? To throw off Western consciousness and to take on an African consciousness. Whether that is problematized by trying to recreate a past that we're still uncovering, or trying to take what we know of the past and reimagine it for the new, take off the other man's clothes. The Afrocentricity, the idea of Afrocentricity, or the African-centered position, right? That we approach our problems, our world, from an African-centered position. That we are the first term in the syllogism, the unqualified term. Man, woman means African man, African woman, without a necessary qualifier. Right? That when we say it, when I say man, I mean you, right? And when I say woman, I mean you. And if I mean somebody else, then I'll say white man or white woman. Let them be the qualifier, right? We're the first term. And then, again, the localisms, right? The Creolite in the Caribbean, the South Pacific, the Indian Ocean, here in the United States. And that it can encompass all of that, right? Our recognition of our connection to each other around the world. And it does seem to be, you know, I meet people, black folks from other parts of the world, it don't take long to like have a sense of community. And then the recognition of the value of the local culture also. That one can be proudly Jamaican and proudly African at the same time, without recourse to Europe. That's my talk, y'all.